Hi, and welcome to our podcast. It's our holiday edition. My name's Joel Thielke, and I'm your host. Just so you don't get confused, I changed the name of the podcast from Sleep Sounds and Meditation to Sleep Stories and Meditation. I'm new to producing podcasts, so I don't know if I made a rookie mistake by changing the name. You can let us know if you have a preference or if you really don't care. Since we're coming up on the holidays, I thought I'd bring you a few stories we recorded last year at the Motivational Studios. The first story is by O. Henry, written in 1905. It's called The Gift of the Magi. A factoid of O. Henry is that was just his pen name. His real name was William Sidney Porter. Gift of the Magi was narrated by actress Aubree Bowen. Our second sleep story isn't really a holiday story, but I thought it would be fun to put them together in the same program. It's called The Adventures of Hansel and Gretel, or Hansel, performed by Meg Sarics. A little known fact about the Brothers Grimm, they were not really writers of fairy tales. They were linguists and scholars in Germany. For you adults, I know these sound like children's stories, and when you think about the holidays, it should bring out the kid in us. Give it a listen, and maybe your inner child will have a holiday. Before we get to the show, I want to tell you about motivationalhypnotherapy.com. You can choose from over 250 audio and visual programs. There's a wide variety of hypnosis and meditation programs and sleep stories, just like you'll hear tonight. Motivationalhypnotherapy.com. It's not just a website. It's a community. If you have any questions or suggestions, email us at support@motivationalhypnotherapy.com. Finally, we've designed this podcast so there are no interruptions or messages from our sponsors during or at the end of our episode, so you can drift off and have a fantastic night's sleep. Without further ado, here's The Gift of the Magi and the Adventures of Hansel and Gretel.
In this adaptation of The Gift of the Magi, we follow a young, sweet couple named Laura and David as they prepare for Christmas. Each wants to buy the other a gift worthy of their one true love, but they have very little money to live off of, let alone buy extravagant presents. What follows is a tale of love and selflessness that's perfect for the holidays or any time of year. Now just listen to the sound of my voice as we get relaxed and settled in for the night. Let's go ahead and get comfortable and cozy and get ourselves ready for a great night's sleep. Start getting comfortable in your bed if you haven't already. Just get nice and cozy. Good. And while you are doing that, just take a deep breath in, let it out, and relax. Stretching all the way out, feeling how good that feels just to stretch. Feeling that tension leave your body. Good. And I want you to feel where your body meets your comfortable bed. Take some deep, steady breaths. Good. Just breathing deeply, letting yourself relax. It's time for bed. Time to let go of the day and quiet your mind for a deep, amazing sleep. And go ahead and just take a few moments to feel how good your bed feels, how ready you are for sleep. Maybe your eyes are starting to feel heavy already, feeling tired, really feeling how comfortable your bed is. Good. Let any sounds you hear take you deeper into relaxation. Let any thoughts you have just take you even deeper. And let the sound of my voice take you even deeper. Just follow the sound of my voice. The gift of the Magi. $1.55. That was all. And 30 cents of it was in pennies. Pennies saved 1 and 2 at a time. 3 times Laura counted it. $1.55. And the next day would be Christmas. There was clearly nothing to do but flop down on the shabby little couch and howl. So Laura did it, which instigates the moral reflection that life is made up of sobs, sniffles, and smiles, with sniffles predominating. While the mistress of the home is gradually subsiding from the first stage to the second, take a look at the home. A furnished flat at $8 per week. It did not exactly fit a beggar description, but it certainly was no mansion. In the hallway below was a mailbox into which no letter would go, and an electric button from which no mortal finger could coax a ring. Also appearing thereunto was a card bearing the name Mr. David Dillingham Young. The Dillingham had been flung to the breeze during a former period of prosperity, when its possessor was being paid $30 per week. Now, when the income was shrunk to $20, though they were thinking seriously of contracting to a modest and unassuming D. But whenever Mr. David Dillingham Young came home and reached his flat above, he was called Dave and greatly hugged by Mrs. David Dillingham Young, already introduced to you as Laura, which is all very good. Laura finished her cry and attended to her cheeks with the powder rag. She stood by the window and looked out dully at a gray cat walking a gray fence in a gray backyard. Tomorrow would be Christmas Day, and she only had $1.55 with which to buy Dave a present. She had been saving every penny she could for months with this result. $20 a week doesn't go far. Expenses had been greater than she had calculated. They always are. Only $1.55 to buy a present for Dave. Her Dave. Many a happy hour she had spent planning for something nice for him. Something fine and rare and sterling. Something just a little bit near to being worthy of the honor of being owned by the love of her life. There was a pier glass between the windows of the room. Perhaps you have seen a pier glass in an $8 flat. A very thin and very agile person may, by observing his reflection in a rapid sequence of strips, obtain a fairly accurate conception of his looks. Laura, being slender, had mastered the art. Suddenly, she whirled from the window and stood before the glass. Her eyes were shining brilliantly, but her face had lost its color within 20 seconds. Rapidly, she pulled down her hair and let it fall to its full length. Now there were 2 possessions of the David Dillingham Youngs in which they both took a mighty pride. One was Dave's gold watch that had been his father's and his grandfather's. The other was Laura's hair. Had the Queen of Sheba lived in the flat across the air shaft, Laura would have let her hair hang out the window some day to dry, just to depreciate Her Majesty's jewels and gifts, Had King Solomon been the janitor, with all of his treasures piled up in the basement, David would have pulled out his watch every time he passed, just to see him pluck at his beard from envy. So now Laura's beautiful hair fell about her, rippling and shining like a cascade of brown waters. It reached below her knee and made itself almost a garment for her. And then she did it up again, nervously and quickly. Once she faltered for a minute and stood still, while a tear or two splashed on the worn red carpet. On went her brown jacket, on went her old brown hat, with a whirl of skirts and with a brilliant sparkle still in her eyes, she fluttered out the door and down the stairs to the street. There she stopped at a sign that said, Madame Sofrine, hair goods of all kinds. One flight up, Laura ran and collected herself, panting. Madame, large, too white, chilly, hardly looked the Sofrine. Will you buy my hair? Asked Laura. I buy hair, said Madame. Take your hat off and let's have a look at it. Down rippled the brown cascade. $20, said Madame, lifting the mass with a practiced hand. Give it to me quick, said Laura. Oh, and the next 2 hours tripped by on rosy wings. Forget the hashed metaphor. She was ransacking the stores for Dave's present. She found it at last. It surely had been made for her husband and no one else. There was no other like it in any of the stores, and she had turned all of them inside out. It was a platinum fob chain, simple and chaste in design, properly proclaiming its value by substance alone. As good as all things do. It was even worthy of the watch. As soon as she saw it, she knew it must be his. It was like Dave. Quietness and value. The description applied to both. $21 they took from her for it, and she hurried home with the 55 cents. With that chain on his watch, Dave might be properly anxious about the time in any company. Grand as the watch was, he sometimes looked at it on the sly on account of the old leather strap that he used in place of a chain. When she reached home, her intoxication gave way a little to prudence and reason. She got out her curling irons and lighted the gas and went to work repairing the ravages made by generosity added to love, which is always a tremendous task, dear friends, a mammoth task. Within 40 minutes, her head was covered with tiny, close-lying curls that made her look wonderfully like a little truant schoolboy. She looked at her reflection in the mirror, long, carefully, and critically. If David doesn't kill me, she said to herself, before he takes a second look at me, he'll say I look like a Coney Island chorus girl. But what could I do? Oh, what could I do with $1.55? At 7 o'clock, the coffee was made and the frying pan was on the back of the stove, hot and ready to cook the chops. Dave was never late. Laura doubled the fob chain in her hand and sat on the corner of the table near the door that he always entered. Then she heard his step on the stair away down on the first flight, and she turned white for just a moment. She had a habit of saying a little prayer about the simplest everyday things, and now she whispered, "Please make him think I am still pretty." The door opened, and Dave stepped in and closed it. He looked thin and very serious. Poor fellow, he was only 22, and to be burdened with a family. He needed a new overcoat, and he was without gloves. He stopped inside the door, as immovable as a setter at the scent of quail. His eyes were fixed upon his wife, and there was an expression in them that she could not read, and it terrified her. It was not anger, nor surprise, nor disapproval, nor horror, nor any of the sentiments that she had been prepared for. He simply stared at her with that peculiar expression on his face. She wriggled off the table and went for him. "Darling," she cried, "don't look at me that way. I had my hair cut off and sold because I couldn't have lived through Christmas without giving you a present. It'll grow out again. You won't mind, will you? I just had to do it. My hair grows awfully fast. Oh, say Merry Christmas, honey, and let's be happy. You don't know what a beautiful, nice gift I've got for you." "You've cut off your hair?" asked Dave, as if he had not arrived at that patent fact, yet even after the hardest mental labor. "Cut it off and sold it," said Laura. "Don't you like me just as well anyhow? I'm me without my hair, aren't I?" He looked around the room curiously. "You say your hair is gone?" he said. "You needn't look for it," said Laura. "It's sold. I tell you, sold and gone, too. It's Christmas Eve. Be good to me, for it went to you. Maybe the hairs of my head were numbered," she went on with a sudden serious sweetness, "but nobody could ever count my love for you. Shall I put on the chops, darling?" Out of his trance, Dave seemed quickly to wake. He enfolded his Laura. For 10 seconds, let us regard with discreet scrutiny some inconsequential object in the other direction. $8 a week or $1 million a year. What is the difference? A mathematician or a wit would give you the wrong answer. The Magi brought valuable gifts, but that was not among them. This dark assertion will be illuminated later on. Dave drew a package from his overcoat pocket and threw it upon the table. "Don't make any mistake, my darling," he said, "about me. I don't think there's anything in the way of a haircut or a shave or a shampoo that could make me like my girl any less. But if you'll unwrap that package, you may see why you had me going a while at first." White fingers and nimble tore at the string and paper, and then an ecstatic scream of joy, and then, alas, a quick feminine change to hysterical tears and wails. For there lay the combs, the set of combs, side and back, that she had been worshipping long in a Broadway window. Beautiful combs, pure tortoiseshell with jeweled rims, just the shade to wear, and the beautiful, vanished hair. They were expensive combs, she knew, and her heart had simply craved and yearned over them without the least hope of possession. And now they were hers, but the tresses that they should have adorned were gone. But she hugged them to her chest, and at length she was able to look up with dim eyes and a smile and say, "My hair grows so fast, darling." And then she leaped up like a little singed cat and cried, "Oh, oh!" David had not seen his beautiful present yet. She held it out to him eagerly upon her open palm. The dull, precious metal seemed to flash with a reflection of her bright and ardent spirit. Isn't it great? I hunted all over town to find it. You'll have to look at the time 100 times a day now. Give me your watch. I want to see how it looks on it. Instead of obeying, her dear husband tumbled down on the couch and put his hands under the back of his head and smiled. Honey, he said, let's put our Christmas presents away and keep them a while. They're too nice to just use at present. I sold the watch to get the money to buy your combs. And now suppose you put the chops on. The Magi, as you know, were wise men, wonderfully wise men, who brought gifts to the babe in the manger. They invented the art of giving Christmas presents. Being wise, their gifts were no doubt wise ones, possibly bearing the privilege of exchange in case of duplication. And here I have lamely related to you the uneventful chronicle of two foolish children in a flat, who most unwisely sacrificed for each other the greatest treasures of their house. But in a last word to the wise of these days, let it be said that of all who give gifts, these two were the wisest. Of all who give and receive gifts, such as they are the wisest. Everywhere they are the wisest. They are the Magi.
Welcome to Sleep Stories. My name is Meg Sarics, and this is the adventures of Hansel and Gretel. I will be guiding you through this classic bedtime story and into a deep, relaxing sleep. And when you wake up in the morning, you're going to feel rested and ready for your day. In this timeless fairy tale adventure of Hansel and Gretel, young Gretel leads her brother in search of food and protection in the great forest they live near, while Hansel leaves a trail of breadcrumbs behind so that their father may find them again, taking us along on their journey into a forest more ancient than man. Let's go ahead and get comfortable and cozy and get ourselves ready for a great night's sleep. Start getting comfortable in your bed if you haven't already. Get nice and cozy. Good. And while you are doing that, just take a deep breath in, let it out, and relax. Stretching all the way out. Good. Feeling where your body meets your comfortable bed. take some deep, steady breaths. Good. Just breathing deeply. Let yourself relax. It's time for bed. Time to let go of the day and quiet your mind for a deep, amazing sleep. And go ahead and just take a few moments to feel how good your bed feels, how ready you are for sleep. Good. Let any sounds you hear take you deep into relaxation. Let any thoughts you might have take you even deeper. And let the sound of my voice take you even deeper. Just follow the sound of my voice. The Adventures of Hansel and Gretel, based on the original story by the Brothers Grimm. Very close to a great forest lived a poor woodcutter with his wife and his 2 children. The boy was called Hansel, and the girl was named Gretel, and the woodcutter's wife was not their birth mother. She was, in fact, their stepmother. Because they were very poor, the little family very often did not have much to eat. Then, to make matters worse, a great famine fell over the land, making it hard to hunt and gather food. Now when he thought over this by night in his bed, and tossed about with worry, Woodcutter groaned and said to his wife, "What is to become of us? How are we to feed our poor children when we no longer have any food even for ourselves?" "I think I have a solution, dear husband," answered the woman. "Early tomorrow morning we will take the children out into the forest to where it is the thickest. There we will light a fire for them, and give each of them 1 more piece of bread, and then we will go to our work and leave them alone. They will not find the way home again, and we shall be rid of them." It should be noted that the stepmother was not particularly fond of children in general, and had wanted to get rid of Hansel and Gretel for some time. "No, my dear," said the man, "I will not do that. How can I bear to leave my children alone in the forest? There are wild animals and all kinds of danger out there." "But you must," said she. "There isn't enough food for all of us, and you and I need to survive. They can fend for themselves." And she bothered him, and left him no peace until he consented. "But I feel very sorry for the poor children all the same," said the man. The 2 children had also not been able to sleep for hunger, and had heard what their stepmother had said to their father. Gretel wept bitter tears and said to Hansel, "Now all is over with us." "Be quiet, Gretel," said Hansel. "Do not worry. I will soon find a way to help us." And when the old folks had fallen asleep, he got up, put on his little coat, opened the door below, and crept outside. The moon was shining brightly, and the white pebbles which lay in front of the house glittered like little diamonds. Hansel stuffed the little pocket of his coat with as many pebbles as he could get in. Then he went back and said to Gretel, "Be comforted, dear little sister, and sleep peacefully. Everything will be okay." And he lay down again in his bed. When day dawned, before the sun had risen, the woman came and awoke the 2 children, saying, "Get up, we are going into the forest to fetch wood." She gave each a little piece of bread and said, "There is something for your dinner, but do not eat it up before then, for that's all we have." Gretel put the bread in her apron, as Hansel had the pebbles in his pocket. Then they all set out together on the way to the forest. When they walked a short time, Hansel stood still and peeped back at the house, and did so again and again. His father said, "Hansel, what are you looking at there and staying behind for? Pay attention and let's keep moving." "Ah, father," said Hansel, "I am looking at my little white cat which is sitting up on the roof and wants to say goodbye to me." The wife said, "You little fool, that is not your little cat. That is the morning sun which is shining on the chimneys." Hansel, however, had not been looking back at the cat, but had been constantly throwing one of the white pebble stones out of his pocket onto the road. When they reached the middle of the forest, the father said, "Now, children, pile up some wood, and I will light a fire that you may not be cold." Hansel and Gretel gathered brushwood together, as high as a little hill. The brushwood was lit, and when the flames were burning very high, the woman said, "Now, children, lay yourselves down by the fire and rest. We will go into the forest and cut some wood. When we have done, we will come back and we'll go back home." Hansel and Gretel sat by the fire, and when noon came, each ate a little piece of bread. And as they heard the strokes of the wood axe, they believed that their father was near. It was not the axe, however, but a branch which he had fastened to a withered tree which the wind was blowing backwards and forwards. And as they had been sitting with such a long time, their eyes closed with fatigue, and they fell fast asleep. When at last they awoke, it was already night time. Gretel began to cry and said, "How are we to get out of the forest now?" But Hansel comforted her and said, "Just wait a little until the moon has risen and is shining brightly, and then we will soon find the way." And when the full moon had risen, Hansel took his little sister by the hand and followed the pebbles, which shone like newly coined silver pieces, and showed them the way. They walked the whole night long, and by break of day came once more to their father's house. They knocked at the door, and when the woman opened it and saw that it was Hansel and Gretel, she said, "You naughty children, why have you slept so long in the forest? We thought you were never coming back at all." The father, however, rejoiced, for it had cut him to the heart to leave them behind alone. Not long afterwards there was once more a famine throughout the land, and the children heard their mother saying at night to their father, "Everything is eaten again. We have 1/2 loaf left, and that is the end. The children must go. We will take them farther into the woods so that they will not find their way out again. There is no other means of saving ourselves." The man's heart was heavy, and he thought, "It would be better for you to share the last mouthful with your children." The woman, however, would listen to nothing that he had to say, but scolded and reproached him. He who says A must say B likewise, and as he had yielded the first time, he had to do so a second time also. The children, however, were still awake and had heard the conversation. When the old folks were asleep, Hansel again got up and wanted to go out and pick up pebbles as he had done before, but the woman had locked the door, and Hansel could not get out. Nevertheless, he comforted his little sister and said, "Do not cry, Gretel. Go to sleep quietly. Everything will be okay." Early in the morning came the woman and took the children out of their beds. Their piece of bread was given to them, but it was even smaller than the time before. On the way into the forest, Hansel crumbled his in his pocket and often stood still and threw a morsel on the ground. "Hansel, why do you stop and look around?" said the father. "Go on." "I am looking back at my little pigeon which is sitting on the roof and wants to say goodbye to me," answered Hansel. "Oh, you foolish boy," said the woman. "That is not your little pigeon. That is the morning sun that is shining on the chimney." Hansel, however, little by little, threw all the crumbs on the path. The woman led the children still deeper into the forest, where they had never in their lives been before. Then a great fire was again made, and the mother said, "Just sit there, you children, and when you are tired you may sleep a little. We are going into the forest to cut wood, and in the evening when we are done, we will come and fetch you away." When it was noon, Gretel shared her piece of bread with Hansel, who had scattered his by the way. Then they fell asleep, and evening passed, but no one came to the poor children. They did not awake until it was dark night, and Hansel comforted his little sister and said, "Just wait, Gretel, until the moon rises, and then we shall see the crumbs of bread which I have strewn about. They will show us our way home again." When the moon came, they set out, but they found no crumbs, for the many thousands of birds which fly about in the woods and fields had picked them all up. Hansel said to Gretel, "We shall soon find the way," but they did not find it. They walked the whole night and all the next day too, from morning till evening, but they did not get out of the forest, and were very hungry, for they had nothing to eat but 2 or 3 berries which grew on the ground. And as they were so weary that their legs could carry them no longer, they lay down beneath a tree and fell asleep. It was now 3 days since they had left their father's house. They began to walk again, but they always came deeper into the forest, and if help did not come soon, the outlook would not be very good. When it was midday, they saw a beautiful snow-white bird sitting on a bough, which sang so delightfully that they stood still and listened to it. And when its song was over, it spread its wings and flew away before them, and they followed it until they reached a little house, on the roof of which it landed, and when they approached the little house, they saw that it was built of bread and covered with cakes, but that the windows were of clear sugar. "Oh, look how good that looks. Let's start in on it right away," said Hansel, "and have a good meal. I will eat a bit of the roof, and you, Gretel, can eat some of the window. It will taste sweet." Hansel reached up above and broke off a little of the roof to try how it tasted, and Gretel leant against the window and nibbled at the panes. Then a soft voice cried from the parlor, "Nibble, nibble, gnaw. Who is nibbling at my little house?" The children answered, the wind, nothing but the wind," and went on eating without disturbing themselves. Hansel, who liked the taste of the roof, tore down a great piece of it, and Gretel pushed out the whole of one round window pane, sat down, and enjoyed herself with it. Suddenly the door opened, and a woman as old as the hills, who supported herself on crutches, came creeping out. Hansel and Gretel were so terribly frightened that they let fall what they had in their hands. The old woman, however, nodded her head and said, "Oh, you dear children, who has brought you here? Do come in and stay with me. No harm shall happen to you." She took them both by the hand and led them into her little house. Then good food was set before them, milk and pancakes with sugar, apples, and nuts. Afterwards, 2 pretty little beds were covered with clean white linen, and Hansel and Gretel lay down in them, and they thought they were in heaven. But the old woman had only pretended to be so kind. She was in reality a wicked witch who lay in wait for children, and had only built the little house of bread in order to entice them there. When a child fell into her power, she would invite it in and eat it for dinner. Witches cannot see far, but they have a keen sense of smell, so she could smell when people were near. But Hansel and Gretel did not know this yet. Early in the morning, before the children were awake, she was already up, and when she saw both of them sleeping and looking so pretty with their plump and rosy cheeks, she smiled to herself with joy. Then she seized Hansel with her shriveled hand, carried him into a little stable, and locked him in behind a grated door. Then she went to Gretel, shook her till she awoke, and cried, "Get up, lazy thing, fetch some water and cook something good for your brother. He is in the stable outside and is to be made fat. When he is fat, I will gobble him up." Gretel began to weep bitterly, but it was all in vain, for she was forced to do what the wicked witch commanded. And now the best food was cooked for poor Hansel, but Gretel got nothing but crab shells. Every morning the woman crept to the little stable and cried, "Hansel, stretch out your finger that I may feel if you will soon be fat." Hansel, however, stretched out a little bone to her, and the old woman, who had dim eyes, could not see it, and thought it was Hansel's finger, and was astonished that there was no way of fattening him. When 4 weeks had gone by, and Hansel still remained thin, she was seized with impatience and could not wait any longer. "Now then, Gretel," she cried to the girl, "stir yourself and bring some water. Let Hansel be fat or lean. Tomorrow I'm going to cook him." Ah, how the poor little sister did lament when she had to fetch the water, and how her tears did flow down her cheeks. "Someone out there, please help us," she cried. "Just keep your noise to yourself," said the old woman. "It won't help you at all." Early in the morning, Gretel had to go out and hang up the cauldron with the water and light the fire. "We will bake first," said the old woman. "I have already heated the oven and kneaded the dough." She pushed poor Gretel out to the oven, from which flames of fire were already darting. "Creep in," said the witch, "and see if it is properly heated so that we can put the bread in." But Gretel saw what she had in mind and said, "I do not know how I am to do it. How do I get in?" "Silly goose," said the old woman. "The door is big enough. Just look, I can get in myself." And she crept up and thrust her head into the oven. Then Gretel gave her a push that drove her far into it, and shut the iron door and fastened the bolt. The witch yelled, but Gretel paid no attention. Better that evil witch burn up than her. Gretel ran like lightning to Hansel, opened his little stable, and cried, "Hansel, we are saved. The old witch is dead." Then Hansel sprang like a bird from its cage when the door was opened. How they did rejoice and embrace each other, and dance about and kiss each other. And as they had no longer any need to fear her, they went into the witch's house, and in every corner there stood chests of pearls and jewels. "These are far better than pebbles," said Hansel, and thrust into his pockets whatever he could get in. And Gretel said, I will take something home with me, too, and filled her pinafore full. But now we must be off, said Hansel. It's time to go home. When they had walked for 2 hours, they came to a stretch of water. We cannot cross, said Hansel. I see no bridge. And there is also no ferry, answered Gretel. But a white duck is swimming there. If I ask her, she will help us over. The duck came to them, and Hansel seated himself on its back and told his sister to sit by him. No, replied Gretel. That will be too heavy for the little duck. She shall take us across one after the other. The good little duck did so, and when they were once safely across and had walked for a short time, the forest seemed to be more and more familiar to them, and finally they saw from afar their father's house. Then they began to run, rushed into the parlor, and threw themselves round their father's neck. The man had not known one happy hour since he had left the children in the forest. The woman, however, had left anyway, and was nowhere to be found. Gretel emptied her pinafore until pearls and precious stones ran about the room, and Hansel threw one handful after another out of his pocket to add to them. Then all anxiety was at an end, and they lived together in perfect happiness. My tale is done. There runs a mouse. Whosoever catches it may make himself a big fur cap out of it.